Hello everyone and welcome to another most exciting game, again from final round of the Altibox Norway Championship 2019. This time I will not be asking you to decide whether it's classical or the Armageddon, since we've already seen the game from the classical time format, so obviously this is the Armageddon. The classical game was drawn even though both Fabi and Carlsen had their chance to win the game, but it was, very complicated. Carlsen's queen b3, super complicated, but in Caruana's case, Magnus, Caruana just trusted Magnus on that one. So without further ado, let's enjoy the Armageddon. Fabi again with the white pieces, and he again opens with e4. We have c5 again, repeating the same line, knight f3, knight to c6, and again Fabi not interested in checking up if Carlsen did any additional training in the World Chess Championship line, so bishop to b5, going again for the Rossolimo. We have knight to f6 by Carlsen, now knight to c3, defending the pawn, and now knight to d4. So already mixing it up from the start, asking why do you want to capture here, but it's a really it's not a line that white would enjoy. For example, if captures, now you would kick away the defender of this pawn here, black can capture it, and now, yes, you will capture this pawn, but after a6, bishop e2, and queen b6, white has some problems here. You can't move the knight because of queen to f2 checkmate. If you play something like d3 to kick away the knight or give knight for knight, black will just capture on f2 and only then recapture the knight. And if you play something like f3, black will still ruin your day by playing knight to f2, and it's it's just nothing white should go for. After Carlsen's this knight to d4 move, we have e5 by Fabi, the main move in this position. Knight captures on b5, we have knight captures on b5, and now knight to d5. And here, Fabi goes for knight to g5. So already you can see that a lot of knights are there in the center of the board, and neither Fabi nor Carlsen are interested in developing their other pieces, or pawns for that matter. So what do you do here? It is a dangerous position. If you play a move like e6, seems like a normal developing move. You're attacking the knight, just defending the knight on d5. White will make it very difficult for black with knight e4, and now you can no longer guard the d6 square. So it's going to be very hard to play this. And on the other hand, if you play something like h6, you're just asking for it. I mean, knight captures on f7, captures on queen f3 check, attacks the knight on d5, so probably knight f6 blocking, captures, and it's just going to be... you don't want to play this with black. So here Carlsen plays f6. And again, it's one of those positions where it's actually okay to play f6. This is the main line in this, in this line. And here... it's very interesting. For example, there is a known move here, queen to f3. Grishuk played it in 2017 against Anton Korobov and won a very nice game with it. But here, Fabi goes for knight to e4. It's an old move. Nakamura played it in 2002 in the Pan American Under-20 Championship, and he won a very nice game with it. So Fabi goes for that. With f5, pushing the knight back, and now knight to g5, repeating, not all that great, because here e6 is actually fine for black. You attack the knight, after h4 you're gonna go bishop e7, just castle, and black will have a very nice game. So after this f5 move, the only known move in this position was, there is one game with knight g5, the line that we've just shown, but there are 5 games in the database with c4. So this is all known theory, but here the move Fabiano plays, knight b to c3, is a new move, and it is now all ready for move 9 that we have a completely new game. So if you capture my knight, I'm going to capture your knight, the knight on d5 is undefended, and here Carlsen just trades and goes d6. We have captures, and the d6. Carlsen says, I'm very happy with this position. We have castles by Fabi, and now d captures on e5. Magnus not interested he doesn't care about doubling his pawns. He always somehow makes it work. We have queen to e2 going to recapture the e5 pawn, and here just e6. Now, you might think, why not just defend it with a move like e4? Well, because all of your pieces are still undeveloped, and protecting a pawn in situations like these will most likely cost you the game. Here white would go rook d1, prepare d3 just to open up lines, and now if you prepare to develop your bishop and castle, d3 is coming already, white is threatening to open lines, and none of your pieces are developed, so not something you want to do. So after queen e2 we have e6, Carlsen gives back the e5 pawn, we have queen captures on e5, Queen to d6 now, offering a trade. Fabi declines it. Queen to e2, and now bishop to e7. Magnus is ready to castle. With b3, preparing to fianchetto the dark square bishop with castles, and now bishop to b2. Bishop to d7, Carlsen is now ready to put his bishop on this very nice diagonal, and now rook 8 to e1. Rook 8 to e8, Carlsen also wants to control this file, and now knight to d1. Making this bishop a very strong piece, and also this bishop is probably coming to f6, so you want to be ready for that. Bishop to f6 by Carlsen, Fabi trades, captures, and now knight to b2. This knight is now coming to c4, which will come with an attack on the queen, and from there the knight is coming to e5, from where nothing will be able to challenge that knight. So if the knight reaches e5, that will be a monster knight. You don't have any pawns to kick it away from e5, and also Magnus has a light square bishop. e5 is a dark square, so you definitely want to get this knight over to e5. Carlsen goes rook to h6. He threatens checkmate and pretty much asks, do you want to play h3 or do you want to trade queens? Fabi decides it's time to trade queens with queen to e5, queen captures, rook captures, and now b6, just defending that pawn. And Fabi goes a4. There's time for this knight to get to e5. There's nothing Magnus can do to take care of that. So here we have an endgame where the material on the board is equal. Both players with 2-pawn islands. One difference is Magnus has a bishop against a knight, but he also has a backwards e6 pawn, which will be a weakness for the rest of the game if Magnus will not be able to do something about it. So bishop to c6 first, getting this bishop to a very nice diagonal, and now a5. Just trying to create weaknesses. Of course, if you capture, then you lose the c5 pawn. With rook to d8, going after this pawn here, and now just a captures on b6. A captures on b6, and now d3, defending the pawn, and now rook to d5. Magnus wants to trade here. And Fabi says, okay, I'm done with the trade, but I want to get my knight over here as soon as possible. So if we trade, my knight gets there without wasting any time. So here, Carlsen has a couple of chances, ideas. Well, your pawn here is under attack, so the idea is basically b5, and after b5, if captures, you will play pawn captures here. You could play bishop captures, but then your problem is after knight to e5, what do you play here? Let's say b4, maybe try and create a backwards c2 pawn here, which it's hard to say how you will take advantage of this. After f3, this bishop is just useless. It's not doing anything, and it's not going to be doing anything for a very long time. This rook is going to come into the game this way, and it's just a much better position for white. So here, b5 is the idea, but then after captures, you're probably going to have to capture with the pawn. And then after knight e5, just push f4. Your bishop is nicely protected here. This was one of the options. Magnus had a different plan. He played bishop to b5. Of course, he wants to trade this bishop for knight. I mean, who wouldn't? But Fabi says, no way, man. Rook captures on b5. We have e captures, and now knight to e3. And here, Carlsen will lose a pawn, either the d pawn or the f pawn. He pushes d4, and knight captures on f5. We have rook to e6, grabbing hold of the open e file, and Fabi now grabs hold of the open a file. So it's a bit of a different setup now. Carlsen decided to give up one pawn, but at least his pawns are now on dark squares, and for this, well, being down a pawn, his compensation is that he will once again be able to control this beautiful diagonal with his bishop. So, okay, bit of a trade-off, but you are down a pawn. But again, he does have the black pieces. It's the Armageddon. He only needs a draw. We have king to f7, and now f3. Making some room for the king and taking care of any back rank, issues. We have king to f6, and now knight back to g3. Now, okay, your knight will no longer have an outpost on e5, but this is also a very nice outpost. We have rook to e7, preventing rook to a7, and now knight to e4 check. We have king to e6, and now rook to a8. And here, Fabi is basically teasing Magnus. He's saying, do you want to go bishop c6, which will ensure you that you can trade bishop for knight here, get rid of your silly bishop, and grab my super knight? But it's actually not the greatest idea. Here, Carlsen should just continue, well, not that, but bringing his king over to the queen side and try and hold this position however he can. But here, Magnus actually plays bishop to c6, which is not the greatest of plans. So feel free to pause the video here and try to figure out why bishop to c6 is not the greatest of moves. I'll give you a couple of seconds. no, don't have my water ready. The glass is empty. I forgot to refill it. You know, that's silly me. But okay, here for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations. You are an excellent endgame player on a Saturday. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, rook a6. The b6 pawn is undefended, and here if bishop captures, first you're gonna capture the pawn and only then recapture the bishop. The problem is after rook b7, now Fabi has knight captures on c5 with check. And after you capture, then rook captures on c6. That's the problem with bishop to c6. So after Carlsen saw this, he played bishop captures on e4. He saw that there was no point defending the b6 pawn. But now Fabi just went rook captures on b6. And now, if you move the king, then Magnus will get a pass pawn on e4. So not interested in that. Magnus says, okay, I'm gonna give you back your pawn here, but bishop here, but without allowing you to create a pass pawn here. So rook captures on c6 with king to d5 and now rook to a6. So here Magnus was able to go into the endgame, but now he's down 2 pawns, which is not something you want to do. With rook to e2 by Magnus, a lot of activity for his rook, rook to a2 defending the c2 pawn, and now king to c6. With h4 by Fabi, h5, and now king to h2. You also can go rook, king f1, kick away the rook, and then try to get your king up the board, but after Magnus hides it on d2, you're not going to be able to go to the second rank. So king h2, with king to b6, and now king to g3. Rook to d2, just waiting there, trying to keep this rook at bay. So this rook has to guard the c2 pawn, the king has to guard the g2 pawn. So f4 by Fabi with g6, and now it seems like you don't really have any more useful moves for white, but Fabi makes it work. King f3, we have king to b7 by Magnus, and now b4. Just breaking open this pawn chain, so if you capture just rook b2, we'll capture both pawns. Not much to it. So here Carlsen tried a sneaky idea, c4, but now you get d captures on c4 and the d3. So here it seems like Magnus managed to wheel his way out of a fishy position, but it's not really going his way. Here, because of course you cannot capture as the rook on a2 is hanging. Here we have king to e3 attacking the rook, and now well, you have to play something. You can't afford this because this just trades down into a losing king and pawn endgame for Magnus. So here Magnus tried rook captures on g2, king captures on d3, and now we have rook to g4. Magnus goes for the king side pawns, with rook to a5, going for rook g5 and eliminating at least one of the pawns. Rook captures on f4 with rook to g5, and now rook captures on h4. With rook captures on g6, and here Magnus played rook to h1, but it was also in this position on move 52 that Magnus Carlsen resigned the game. As it's 3-1 and it's not something you can hold, white will just play c5, and you will not even be able to deliver any checks, because whenever the king hides, you will also be able to just push the pawn, hide yourself behind the pass pawn, not pass, but behind the pawn, and it will just be very easy to win this game. So Magnus knows this, and he decides to resign the game here. So very interesting. Even though he only needed a draw here, it really didn't seem like he was playing for a draw. I think he was just having fun, as he already won the tournament, and you don't actually lose any rating points for losing Armageddon. So a very interesting game, to say the least, and an excellent victory for Fabiano Caruana against Magnus in a game that he had to win, as it is Armageddon. And also very interesting, let's check out the standings, as we didn't check them out. Magnus Carlsen won it with 13.5 points, followed by Yu Yang and Levon Aronian with 10.5. Then we have Caruana and Wesley So with 10. Ding Liren with 8.5, Maxim Vachier-Lagrave and Vishwanath Anand with 8, and Mamedyarov and Alexander Grishuk with 5.5, and didn't really have the greatest tournament. But also it's very important to see how the Armageddon actually influences the standings. So if we look at it one more time, you can see that, for example, Ding Liren, you can see that there are no zeros there. Okay, he lost a lot of games in the Armageddon, but he did not lose a single classical game, and he won 2 classical games, the same as Magnus Carlsen. But Carlsen is first and Ding Liren is 6th. So if we didn't have Armageddon here, we would basically have a tie between Magnus Carlsen and Ding Liren in first place. For example, because Ding lost pretty much all of his Armageddons. He lost 6 Armageddons. Whereas, for example, Yu Yang lost 2 classical games, won 2 classical games, but won pretty much all of his Armageddons. I believe he lost 1, and he got 2nd place, thanks to the Armageddon. So it's very interesting. Even though you don't mess up your rating due to Armageddon, it does affect the standings quite a lot. Because here, like I said, if it was only a classical event, we would have Carlsen and Ding tied for 1st place. But because it's also an Armageddon, then Ding is 6th and Carlsen is clear 1st. Which is very interesting if more and more tournaments go into this format of the tournament. Then it's not going to be enough, to just have good classical skills. You will have to be, the most complete in every possible way. You will have to be able to play everything: bullet, rapid, blitz, classical. And I think the future of chess is going in that direction, because everyone is. I mean, okay. Classical is classical. It's always a shame to decide a classical tournament or match in a different time format. But people love it. The games that come out of Armageddon are super exciting, and you will very rarely see such crazy games played in just classical time format. So I'm very interested in how the other tournament organizers will look up to this, or maybe look down to this. But that's just the thing. Things are happening. I think chess has a very bright future. So we'll just have to wait and see where this whole Armageddon thing takes us. But yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it and this short coverage of the Altibox Norway Championship. I would like to thank Greg Hampton, Remington Roth, Nabel Ekton, Jun Zhao, and Emir Zech for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon. I have some interesting videos coming up, and also we are going back to the Capablanca saga up until the Grand Chess Tour starts in Zagreb. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your Saturday.